Brian Turner, President of the Academy of Culinary Arts, probably appeared more time cooking on television than anyone I know. What a pleasure to have you here today. You're going to cook us?
This is a butter bean stew with scallops, and it's just such a lovely sweet dish that shows off the scallops. It's actually got a really nice vegetable accompaniment with it. A firm favourite in my household. Get a bit of oil in the pan to make our stew. And so we need some onions in there first. And once again, as in many occasions, it doesn't really matter about the recipe. I've got 1 onion, 2 onions. You just want to, whatever you've got there, don't let anybody.
So cook to taste.
Cook to taste. You're absolutely right. When my dad came back from the war, there wasn't a lot of stuff about, and so in those early days, you had to just make do with whatever you could get.
Sure.
So I've got the scallops there, so I'm going to come to. I've got onions in there with a bit of olive oil.
Yeah.
I've got some red pointy pepper. So we'll put some of that there, nice colour. Just get it so it actually just stews through. That's all we really want it to do. I just want the flavours in there and the colours in there. I don't really want it to be coloured at all.
Right.
It's the natural colours will actually give us all the colour we need. So we got peppers, we got onions, I got some sweet corn, and I got some butter beans. Now I've cooked the butter. These are tin butter beans, but you need to cook the butter beans in advance if you're going to do it. Remember, when you cook them in unsalted water, butter beans, about 1.5 hours, and just let them boil away. Don't put salt in there; it toughens them up.
Okay.
You already just see lots of bags of colour.
Yeah.
Then we take and if you can't get fresh for whatever reason, then just get a tin, but put it in at the last minute. It's got to be cooked a bit, but it doesn't need long to cook with this at all.
Right. Your influence in the trade. What made you want to go into this business?
Well, I don't think I ever really made a conscious decision to come into business. As I say, my dad came back from the last World War, where he'd been drafted into the Army Catering Corps.
Yeah.
He was a sort of a graphic designer at the Co-op before that was my dad. And when he came back, he went to the Co-op Cafe in Morley, and I understand he made a reputation for himself, did my dad, as a cook. And at some stage then, I've got some bacon here, I might as well put some bacon in there as well. And he made a reputation for himself, and he decided then that he'd buy a transport cafe. But in those days, you didn't have any money to buy anything, so he actually found these properties, and he opened a transport cafe. You could tell how clever a man my dad was, because every time he found a property, the government wanted that property. Compulsory purchase order. So he'd set up, get his cafe going, get all his customers coming. A year and a half later, they come and say, we're going to buy that. And of course, in those days, you had no alternative. The government wanted it for rebuilding. They had it.
Sure.
But that's the only reason my dad got them, because it was a cheap rent. Because eventually,
didn't know how long it's been before. Yeah?
Exactly, new houses. So my mum and my dad, they had 4 children within 5 years. We had twins in the house.
Is that chicken stock?
That's a bit of chicken stock, yeah. And they had 4 kids in 5 years. So I lived most of the time with my Auntie Kathleen, my dad's sister. Yeah. And whenever he could, he'd get me down to the cafe with him to work. It's child labour. I was a slave. Okay, so I've just got that stew on there. I want to cook the sweet corn through.
How long, approximately?
5 minutes-ish, I would think.
Sure.
Okay. Now what I'm going to do now quickly, I'm going to fry some scallops. The trick here, if you try, they're a lot cheaper if you buy them in the shell. Sure. And you can't use all of it. Now they should have used all of it, but there's a technique. The first thing you need to do is make sure you got a cloth that protects your hand. And you need a knife. This is an oyster knife. And all you do is just slip the knife in and just twist it like that. You hear it pop? Yep. There she goes. And then a palette knife. Flat side first. So cut into the flat side. Just release the meat gently. That comes off, so we don't want that. Remember the days when we used to make ashtrays out of these? Everybody had one with a Chianti bottle in all the best restaurants. And then just very carefully, just release the meat from the shell. From there she goes, is lovely. She's lovely, so I'll put some more in there. And then once we've got this, you use your finger and thumb Just release that bit of white muscle that was holding it on there, and the rest is just a membrane that holds the whole thing together. It may appear to be a waste. You can use the coral, that's that bit there, the roe, but we're just going to use these bits here. And we need to, don't put them in, get them out of the fridge half an hour in advance is my tip. Because you don't want them cold in the middle, because we don't want to cook them in the middle to get them hot, otherwise you'll overcook them. Just to make them different. You can either, you don't actually always need any oil, much oil in there at all, just a little bit. People cook them in dry pans sometimes, I don't like to do that. Let's just swap those over so you, Roy, can see what's going on.
Thank you.
Okay. Now here's just a little difference. On one side, a little bit of curry powder. Now you really want to put it on and take it off almost. Okay, so we'll just do that. As far as I'm concerned, it's always the presentation side goes in first, then any dirty bits that are left go onto the underneath bit rather than to the top bit.
Okay.
So that.
So formal training, Savoy.
Yes, I was lucky. I actually had a very nice domestic science teacher called Elsie Bibby, and between her and my father, they convinced me to go to catering college. My mum didn't want me to do that because she'd seen what it did to my dad. Never at home, always with the lads and all that kind of thing. I did 2 years. They said, Brian should go into management, he'll never make a chef. Is there anything guaranteed to motivate a Yorkshireman than telling him, any better way than telling him he can't do it? He wouldn't be good at it. Look, a bit of double cream here. That's just about cooked, is
That's
that?
going quite early.
Yeah, well, we're nearly finished.
Yeah, I'm almost frightened of double cream. It's going to curdle, you see. You're straight in, no problem at all.
Yeah, you just tell it. If you curdle, I won't use you. Oh, that's lovely.
So, Savoy Hotel, after that?
After that, well, it's interesting actually because I out of all of us in the years at college, only 2 of us applied to come to London. And I was one. I applied to the Savoy Hotel, who said that they were full and couldn't fit me in. So they did have a job at Simpsons in the Strand, and if I wanted to work there for a while, they would then make sure that when a vacancy came up at the Savoy Hotel, I could go and work there.
Right.
That's when I bumped into Mr. Richard Shepherd.
Well, of course.
And
Your life went downhill ever since.
life has never been the same since. That's absolutely true. Huh? It was a great meeting. Was that mates for 50 years, and yeah. So I was at Simpson in the Strand, then the Savoy Hotel. Then Mr. Shepherd went across to France, and so I decided I couldn't do that. I'd be following him everywhere.
Sure.
So I went to Switzerland and worked at the Beau Rivage Palace, which was and still is one of the world's great restaurants.
Yeah.
Great hotels, I should say.
Sure.
And so I worked there for a year and a half, and I got myself a little bit, sadly, just a little bit homesick.
Yeah.
And I came back home. Did a bit of mould and sea salt there just to go on top. Nice season. Don't overseason these. We want a little bit of salty sweetness in this, but not too much.
Right.
It's got a bit of salty, it's got a bit of sweetness as that. So really, I'm just about ready. And the thing about scallops, once again, is you need to make sure that they're underdone, but cooked in the middle, just cooked in the middle.
Yeah.
And you know, if you overcook it, anything, I always say, there's no system to bring it back.
Sure.
You have to start again.
Sure.
So, undercook them. If you're not sure, don't cook them too much. You can always, it's not quite cooked enough for me, put it back in.
Yeah.
And it'll just take a little bit longer. Bit of chopped parsley in there. It's a nice colour.
So you're back from Switzerland?
Back from Switzerland, came back to London, went to work, turned down the Ritz, went to work at Claridge's.
Yeah.
Did a year at Claridge's, and Mr. Shepherd phoned me up and said, I've got a new job, I'm head chef. Good gosh, where are you? At the Capitol Hotel. Fantastic. I want you to come as my number 2. Certainly, Mr. Shepherd. So I joined him there in 1971. 2 days later, off he went to Pierre Glaze to learn how to put a menu together. And I opened the hotel, and he came back 2 months later, and we changed the menu. And in 1975, I think it was, we got that first wonderful Michelin star.
I remember that well.
Don't put too much on. It's the colours that I just think are so nice together. And butter beans are vastly underrated.
Okay.
They're really delicious, good for you.
Yeah, that's good.
It's
Okay,
simple.
That's a fair portion, isn't it? That's gorgeous.
It is a great portion, is that? It's a simple dish.
Just a little olive oil on top.
Just a bit of oil, just to give it that little bit of colour. And there you have it. Scallops with a butter bean stew.